Somewhere in the last few decades, the job of managing the climate crisis has fallen to business and government. It makes sense. Both have invested in growth by extracting natural resources to create our community, our global society, and our convenience. Extraction becomes policy or strategy or positioning or compromise. However, both government and business have limitations. These hard stops are socially accepted constructs called national borders or shareholder value. Nature is rarely, if ever, a part of this dialogue. My name is Ian Edwards, and thank you for joining Broto Art Climate Science and our program called Affinity. I also come from business, from a career in trying to make sustainable business a conduit for a sustainable future. But we're missing some experts in these policy and strategy meetings, namely artists and scientists, insightful explorers who are unbounded by limitations like national priorities or fiduciary duty. So I put this panel on the program as an invitation to artists and scientists to get familiar with business and government. How can business and government find new energy and priorities from our art science community? Just as artists and scientists are looking for a credible foothold in the climate challenge, business people and government reps are eager for ideas that can push us past the stuck status quo. Here's our panel called Business, Nature, Government. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Ian Edwards, and I'm hosting this session of the Broto Art Climate Science Conference. As you know, this is about building affinity within stakeholders tasked with fixing the climate, and also within overall our society's partnership with nature. So I wanted to start just by saying, why do we have business and government people on an art and science program? I think creative collaboration is always a good thing, and so let's see how we might be able to create more affinity with the stakeholders. Business and government have been tasked with fixing the challenge, so let's understand what they are dealing with day to day. Let's see what ways the art and science thinking can help their strategies. And let's realize that any path toward a sustainable future is going to go through government and business organizations, or the business and government will be very helpful in executing any of our art science innovations that come up. So here to help us untangle all of this are our three panelists. I want to say welcome to Susan Todd, a sustainability consultant and natural capital evaluator. I want to say hello to Kurt Spalding, Brown University professor and former EPA administrator, and Stafford Sheens. He's a Chief Technology Officer and a carbon industry innovator. You can see more about them on our conference portal. So welcome panelists, and dare I say, let's get to business. I wanted to establish through this panel and others on the Affinity program the degree to which we might be estranged from nature. So how might you characterize the present relationship of business and government to nature, and what's the trend? Susan, you want to start?
Sure. Thanks very much, Ian. And yeah, so pleased to be part of this panel. I think it's going to be a great discussion. I think we've forgotten how much we depend on nature. And what gives me hope is I think that the trend is towards starting to remember that dependence. And some of this is being brought home, and nature is forcing us to remember through wildfires and droughts and violent storms, things like that. And I think some businesses that are more intimately connected to nature, those that like fisheries and forestry and agriculture, live it every day, and they probably haven't forgotten their dependence on nature, but for them the risk is thinking that they've got it all sorted out and that they can manage their way out of the crises that we have. And governments, I'm really seeing some of this remembering of the dependence showing up at the local government level. So quite excited to see what's happening there with local governments starting to take stock of their natural capital, starting to figure out ways to put value on it. I think there's something happening there.
Kurt, I wanted to ask you, maybe a brand new day for the EPA going forward after the election. I mean, what is the government's thoughts on nature as a partner?
Actually, it's pretty dysfunctional.
I get.
Yeah, no, government is not leading on this at this point. I'll share that we had a creative tension within EPA when I served under the Obama administration. We had a brilliant man named Paul Anastas from Yale come lead our Office of Research and Development. And he wanted to create a sense that sustainability needed to be the driving true north for everything EPA did. And he asked the National Science Foundation to look at EPA. And there's a green book out there which provides a very thorough critique. But the bottom line is our environmental statutes are not really aligned around, quote, sustaining nature. I used to joke that the only statute you'll find the word sustainability in is the National Environmental Policy Act. They're very legalistic and they're generating, they don't ask how, they just ask what. So the example I always use, which is somewhat troubling, is the way we solve water pollution problems. We essentially collect the water, treat it, and throw it into the nearest body of water. We don't think about that water cycle that's so critical to sustaining plants, animals, and people. Why are we doing that? Why aren't we putting water back into the aquifer? Why are we basically breaking that cycle nature that's so important in nature? So that's just an example. We've got a long ways to go, and hopefully under the new administration, some of these ideas will start to take hold and we'll start to see reform.
And staff, your technology is quite attuned with nature. Why don't you tell our audience what you do?
Sure. Yeah, actually, funny that Kurt mentions Paul Anastas, because he was one of my PhD advisors. We have several patents and papers together. So I used to work with that, former assistant administrator of the EPA. And I like to think that my, work after my PhD, has continued to carry the torch of green and sustainable design and green chemistry. My company is in the I would say very early stage field of carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. That we call it CCUS. Within the industry. In this field, my company as well as several others are trying to take carbon dioxide and transform it into things that are better for the world than climate change. And I kind of, I channel, if you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, I channel Bubba Gump a little bit, Bubba from Forrest Gump a little bit when I say that, he says, oh, well, you can make shrimp souffle, shrimp pasta, shrimp blah, 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 like anything like that. Well, I'm kind of like that with carbon dioxide. You can make carbon dioxide concrete, you can make carbon dioxide building materials, you can make carbon dioxide gravel, you can make carbon dioxide, what we make, vodka, sanitizer, plastics, things like that. My company's technology it specifically transforms carbon dioxide into alcohols. And then we use those alcohols for consumer products.
And that should lead us to our next question, which is the idea that, anybody who's followed the business side of sustainability knows that the SEC treats climate change as material information, and the UN and much of its sustainability advice asks for nature to have a proxy and materiality assessments, and materiality for the uninitiated is a strategic tool for organizations to weigh the risks of key environmental, social, and governance issues against their key stakeholders. Mother Nature is never really given a voice, and I've always wondered why she hasn't, to personify this or anthropomorphize this. Can we think of nature as a partner? Why and why not? And maybe staff, you could start. Maybe you can explain something about your enterprise.
Yeah, sure. So this is probably ties into a global cultural push. I think people have become much more aware in the last 20 years or so, since I was a teenager, of climate change and of sustainability issues and challenges around sustainability. That's one of the reasons why businesses all of a sudden, seem in many cases, seem like they've started to care because consumers care. And we need to continue that cultural shift so that, consumers will care and continue to care about how things are made and sustainability and the environment, so that people will buy the products that are made, in a more sustainable way, or prioritize the companies that are being more sustainable. Companies really only care about their, especially big companies. Maybe small companies that are run by individuals can kind of be influenced by the individuals a little bit more. But once you're a big company and you're run by the public, run by the stock market, things like that, you really just care about your bottom line. So for business to be able, to have an impact on this, really it just has to be consumer culture changing, and that's been exemplified by the Carbon X Prize that I'm currently in Calgary competing in. The Carbon X Prize is a competition to turn carbon dioxide into value-added products, where you're scored based on the value of your product and based on the volume of carbon dioxide that you could convert. It's a $20 million competition, so the stakes are high. Several teams. There's 5 finalist teams here in Alberta with me that are transforming the carbon dioxide that comes out of a natural gas power plant to try to make these products. But a big part of this is really showcasing that you can make products out of carbon dioxide to try to drive that cultural change, which in turn will drive the business change. Because when culture changes to demand sustainability, then the businesses are going to have to change, and the ones that aren't sustainable are, they're not going to sell their products, and they're going to feel it in their bottom line, which is, like I said, the only place businesses really feel anything.
Susan, what are you seeing in your practice when it comes to nature and being a business partner?
Yeah, so staff is focused on the consumer, and I'll look at a different stakeholder group, which is the investors. And very much, as Stafford says, investors care about the bottom line, they care about their returns, but they also really care about risk. And more of them are recognizing that climate change poses risks, both physical risks and the risks that they refer to these days as transitional. So the risks that businesses face as society gets on board and starts adapting to climate change. And so there have been concerns from the central bankers around the world that climate change has not been priced in to the value of a lot of stocks, which means that capital markets could be in for a big adjustment when the chickens come home to roost. And so they're asking for more disclosure of these risks in mainstream financial filings, as well as the voluntary reports that we've been seeing for a while. Institutional investors are particularly interested because they've got long time horizons. These would be the people that hold pension plan assets, and so they're asking companies to get on board and start disclosing. But disclosing just means you're providing more information. It doesn't mean you're changing what you're doing, but at least you're being transparent about what you're doing. And so that can start to, then investors can make better decisions and put their money where their mouth is.
So I've argued that nature and investing in nature is a resource management and cost of doing business issue. I think that we have to involve nature in a way that we haven't so far, and you're explaining many of the problems that we're having with this. What's the problem with this pitch that we shouldn't be doing more investment in nature to make more nature and extend the resource base? Kurt, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's challenging because it's hard to do restoration and quantify what restoration is about and create investment opportunities in restoration. I mean, there's been lots of discussion about investing in forest or reforestation to capture carbon, or restore, in an area I'm very familiar, building salt marshes or eelgrass restoration and trying to value that. And then there's these issues that go with that around equity. So if a firm is doing that and not essentially addressing their carbon footprint or their carbon issues, which usually mean they've also got other pollution issues to go with that, at where their firm is, then those who live around that facility or that place say, well, wait a minute, you're buying out the impact you're having on my own community. So there's a lot of nuance and challenge around aligning investment the way one would like. It's possible, though. I don't understand all the detail of it. I've seen work done in the District of Columbia, for example. I think it was called the water company there basically put an investment product out to push green infrastructure forward. So there are emerging ways to do it, and I think it's very exciting to see.
Excellent. I always wonder if I'm a maker of soap, am I not interested in the future of water? The idea that there should be some sort of interest in future generations and their resource base and long-term business viability, they don't always seem to be in sync with what I personally think is not happening.
To follow up, it is the people there, they have to be accountable too. The regulators, for example, you run a firm and you've got to meet permits. There's no requirement on the part of government that they think about that. They're just supposed to comply with their pollution permit, air permit, water permit, whatever. That's where we have to improve. We have to begin to put this whole system thinking into our frame of reference and how we incent these firms to behave, and the externalities our system is designed to address. Externalities meaning impact on the environment. So I think the economic thinking is there. I'm not sure the innovation in regulation and law is there yet. And that's what's hopefully going to emerge, although it's very challenging to see in Washington, where you see this very divided Congress, how you can get to that place to restructure our system to really put the right incentives in place, to really value nature as you're describing it. So that's a big challenge. I know that at the local level, as Susan talked about, it's starting to emerge, state level, province level, to be respectful to Susan.
Thank you.
But it's coming, I think, and really the innovation a lot of it is in the state and local level. Federally, we've got a ways to go.
Right. Susan, do you have a perspective on this?
Well, yes, I was just having a conversation today with someone from the insurance industry, and they and their colleagues in finance are really looking at an uptick in interest in developing a pipeline for all this institutional investor capital that wants investable projects in natural capital restoration. And so just in addition to the challenges that Kurt mentioned, it's coming up with the clear KPIs that we can show the project has made a difference, so that like a green bond can have clear investable green features to it in addition to the standard return. But there's a lot of money out there that's very eager to be put to work in these ways. Certainly, this is in the Canadian space. I'm not as familiar with what you're dealing with south of the border, but can imagine it would only be more intense. So that gives me hope that we could see something if we can sort out the measurement issues and the technical ones to get a clear return.
A lot of our audience, the majority of our audience, identify as artists. So a lot of these ideas might be new to them. This idea that we should be investing in reforestation or restocking lakes with fish, or understanding our way of rehabilitating the environment. So I'm glad to hear that things seem to be moving in the right direction as a trend. Hopefully that's the case. So I wanted to ask again, because most of our audience are not working in business and not working in government. I think that what we see is when we see governments bailing out banks and industries with these $1 trillion fixes. but we somehow don't have the money to address the climate crisis. So, what are the incentives and disincentives to work in working toward a better or more affirming partnership with nature? Can we not come up with $1 trillion to help nature out?
Well, of course we can. Of course we can. And I think we talked about some of the issues that make it harder. But I go back to what you all were talking about. We were talking about some time ago, and I think Stafford hit it on the head, and that is this cultural change piece. And that's where art really matters. I mean, what is the best expression of culture? Well, in fact, it's art. And how that drives investment or these decisions are there, I think come from there. Yes, there's plenty of money, I think, to do the things we need to do. I do think it's going to be interesting, this idea of private capital, not just public capital. So we think about how our cities were built in the 20th century. There was a lot of private investment, public investment helped drive private investment. How do we align that infrastructure, public-private infrastructure kind of helping each other? I think we have to create a vision for what it could be like. What kind of city are we going to see after sea level rises 5 feet in Boston? That's a big conversation. Or where I live in Providence, and only art, I think, or creative enterprise can come to that kind of way of thinking about it. We have to create that what the world will be like, because we're so afraid of what it might be. But I think we have to remember that what we're in that to now, there was some image created of what it is today that we're living with highways and depopulated cities and the works. So that's where I come back to quite often. It's just, how do you create that vision?
You know, I often say in this Broto experiment that the business and government people are working within this near-term environment where you're limited by borders and shareholder value and transparency and regulations. And yes, artists and scientists, by comparison, have an expansive tableau to experiment and think. And I often think that what we end up with this Broto experiment is the potential to innovate some of these things and move the bar where you are working with what you can do. Art and science is going to maybe take you further than that. Staff, you're working with nature. You're developing nature-friendly technologies. Are you finding that in the investor side, in the business side, in the partnership side, a win, or are you still climbing uphill?
Well, it's very challenging. I think, and I think I can speak on the behalf of the kind of the whole CCUS field here. It's very challenging to raise money for projects like this. I think that there's very few sources of corporate venture capital or traditional, what you'd call it, traditional venture capital that would go into this. I do have a prior history in software startups, so I've seen kind of like the more traditional Silicon Valley model, and I'm familiar with that. And it's much harder to raise capital for these sorts of projects that are, capital equipment, capital intensive. You need to actually build things. You need to actually build things that are fairly high risk. And that risk comes with, a potential reward, but usually those rewards, are more environmental than financial. And so it's really, I guess there still is a big challenge. All of our, at Air Company, we're very fortunate that we have all, private family office investment. And they pretty much, are aligned with my co-founder and I on the fact that we want to see, true environmental change, true sustainability. And that, is something that we're very grateful for. Otherwise, I think, a lot of the businesses that, I'll give you some examples that are, public, everybody knows about them. Carbon Engineering is, debatably the largest direct air capture company in the world. they had to go to Occidental Petroleum, to Oxy, to get investment funds. And so their plants are being built to capture carbon from the air, powered by natural gas, to then inject the CO2 into the ground for enhanced oil recovery. And you have to kind of like then look at that business model and say, well, right now it's not being used for sustainability. And I'm not singling out this one company. There's tons of CCUS companies like this. Right now it's not being used for sustainability, but I think they're making the argument that the ends justify the means. That we want to get to this stage where, direct air capture, carbon capture, is broadly applied. But to get there, you have to take a few stepping stones that are maybe a little bit unsavory. For us, I would say the pill that's hard to swallow for our company is not on the consumer side, because we do everything we can for the sustainability of our products, but it's definitely on the investor side, because the investors then have to look at this and say, well, are we comfortable with all of these different risk factors, like selling a consumer product, which is hard to do. There's a lot of vodkas out there. There's a lot of sanitizers out there. Compounded with the fact that it's brand new technology and there's this risk of scaling up. And we're not the only company in that boat either. But in all aspects of this field, you run into that. You run into these challenging dichotomies where you can sell out and scale up to some. And I'm oversimplifying that. You can sell out and scale up, or you can take the really hard road where you kind of have to bootstrap it, be scrappy. You have your CTO doing welding. You have your CEO bottling and labeling. You kind of have to. We're a less than 10 person company. We're 8 people right now. So it's everybody kind of has to do a little bit extra, because it's harder for us to access those larger tranches of capital unless we take one of those ends justify the means approaches, which we really are hesitant to do just based on our own principles.
So Ian, I just want to add,
Yep.
What if government provided tax credits if we could measure or make the differentiation that's being discussed or Stafford's saying? And that's where creativity's got to come in on the side of government. Government has incented so many different investments in the private sector in the past. We could do this if we just step back a little bit, perhaps got away from some of the ideological differences that can be pretty paralyzing in the way we talk about climate change, and really said, look, we're going to need tech. We're going to need great ideas like this. How do we incent them and help make that investment more attractive? I've seen it before in a whole lot of things, especially for real estate. I mean, why have we so populated the coastal zone? Well, real estate credits, incentives, mortgage interest deduction, all of those things. So we can do this. We just have to get at it.
Well, I'm sure entrepreneurs like staff would be keen to hear something about some tax credits towards their industries.
It would really help. It would be, because he's totally right. I mean, it's very hard to
well, and scale is always an issue with some of these ideas. Is that you can have a great idea that pulls carbon out of the environment to make a consumer product, but it's meaningless unless it's at scale, like global and synchronous.
Right.
So certainly an incentive to globalize some of these great ideas is probably something that the government could do for that. And I think with that segue, I wanted to ask more about where you think art and science might be able to collaborate with you and maybe loosen some of these limitations or create some incentives, or I don't know, you tell me, where Susan, where does art and science come in to help you do your job?
Where I'm thinking about in terms of incentives is just helping us to overcome short-termism. So short-termism in capital markets, well described problem there, but just in the economy generally. The economy operates at a different scale than a human lifespan, which operates at a different scale than nature. And what artists and scientists help us do, I think, is to get in touch with those different scales. Scientists help us see the universe, and they help us see new particles that we didn't even know existed before. And artists can help us slow things down and focus really clearly on something. They draw attention. They create a pause in your day. And they can also show large impacts. I'm thinking of the photographer Edward Bertinsky's Anthropocene project, showing like
Sure.
these huge quarries and oil sands and things like that. But I'm including in artists, musicians, and live performers and things like that. So it's everything that focuses on the human scale, on a natural scale, and provides an antidote to the constant urging to be operating at the scale of every quarter, every day, every minute, and every new product release.
I find it alarming that government and business can't operate at a human scale, but I understand. Staff, what do you got to say about art and science for making business better?
Well, I mean, we're trying to exemplify that in our business. We work with a lot of artists and designers. Even on our website, you can kind of see that we have this Air Studio initiative that works with designers to take sustainable materials, and produce kind of a better for the planet sustainable alternative. That's aligned with what we do. It's aligned with our brand. It's aligned with our business. It's something that we're trying to do to just help amplify the voices of some of these artists as well. Obviously, I'm the science guy on our team, so the way that we have an impact is with our technology that makes our products. I think that what really could be helpful, kind of going forward, to even beyond the impact that we may have, because we're a small business, would be artists trying to help to educate people as to what the problems are, because I think a lot of people don't even understand the link between greenhouse gases and climate change. I think that we here, just the fact that we're at this conference probably means we know a little bit more than your average member of the general public about the climate and about climate change. And being able to educate more of those, more people who are maybe on that median level, and especially the people who are, who have maybe less knowledge about climate science, and who it's really, irrelevant to their day-to-day life. It's definitely relevant to their day-to-day life on a long term, but like you don't wake up and climate change isn't blared in your face. It's not like coronavirus, which is a very, acute problem in the grand scheme of things. A pandemic is an acute problem because eventually we'll find a way to solve it on a scale of years, whereas on climate change we have to find a way to solve it on a scale of decades, just because it's that much harder a problem to solve. I think we need to have kind of more art out there that aims to educate and teach people.
One of the things about the Broto experiment is that it's not necessarily the art outcome that is the goal of this. It's the art thinking that adds the value and the perspective to some of these initiatives. And certainly, yes, we want to eventually have climate change operas and ballets and art, but there's a process that they go through to get to a place where they realize some sort of truth about the way the world is. And I was thinking, Kurt, what you mentioned, that we could be looking at some sort of government policies that have a kind of a creative twist to them, that this is where art thinking could come in and provide you some value as a policy advisor. Or a creator of new initiatives that could support more green business and government and other issues. Do you think art thinking is a value add for you?
Oh, absolutely. I was just on a call today and we were talking about resilience work, this idea that communities engage in how they're going to be resilient going forward. And we were really saying well, can a design group help us with the design thinking, not necessarily just the design of,
Right.
but the design of process to help make this resilience vision clearer. So yes, there's process in doing art as well as art. I have the wonderful opportunity to hang out with people at RISD. One of my collaborators is a RISD faculty. I've been part of, was part of a whole program of just what creativity is about and how creativity, just the process of creativity, thinking, can help drive the solution development that we all need to have and bring that thinking and process into government thinking. So there's all sorts of ways, interaction with the art community and art people who think seriously about art. And if one institution thinks seriously about art, it's the Rhode Island School of Design. So that process has been amazing for me during my time at Brown. And if I get an opportunity to get back in the chair in terms of being able to advise others on policy and activity, I'll take that with me because that's really, really important. I will say I've seen great work down in Charleston. One of the reasons Charleston is so engaged in climate adaptation is they actually did a whole art effort to tell people what sea level rise would mean to Charleston. So you had art all over the city that helped. And Charleston is now perhaps one of the leading cities on how to adapt to climate change because of that.
So I'm looking at the clock and I wanted to have us wrap up with one of the harder questions, I think, which is to say, if business and government has been successful in fixing the climate crisis, that we can finally relax and not worry about the future. What has happened? Is there any ideas you can sort of leave us with that art and science might take and run with?
That's a complex answer. Simple question, complex answer. Yeah, I think it's got to be part of it. I mean, I don't think this idea of siloed thinking, scientists do science and artists do art and policymakers do policy, makes any sense at all. I will say that we need to model ourselves on what I had the opportunity to see, and I know others have too. You spend time with tribal peoples in this country, you realize it all fits together. I mean, tribal song sort of reinforces the sustainability ethic that is part of their whole worldview. It's all connected, and I think that's the thing we need to do more than anything else is nurture these connections and ways of thinking, and build a more holistic way of approaching these problems, and involve everyone in the conversation. Not just the lawyer and not just the engineer and not just the scientist, but actually have everyone at the table visioning how we move forward as community.
I'll give you an idea of where I think is something that would have happened in the future. We would have stopped drilling for fossil fuels. We would have taken efforts to try and reverse some of the systemic issues that feed upon itself towards the 6 degree C issue. I do think that a good start would to say, let's not dig up any more fossil fuels. We've got enough to burn already. Susan, what did you think?
Well, when you mentioned that, what goes to my mind is the biodiversity crisis is at least as big as the climate crisis, and the climate crisis is feeding the biodiversity crisis. So and I was just watching David Attenborough's new pitch where he just comes out like, okay, no holds barred, totally full on statement about the situation that a 92-year-old can make. And so in that world, we will have started to reverse the biodiversity losses. We'll be seeing increasing diversity instead of decreasing diversity. We'll have learned how to take inspiration from nature. I get so excited by the biomimicry movement, and my students just go crazy when I bring in examples of biomimicry, how we can learn from the innovations that nature's figured out over millennia. Nature is a problem solver. We are problem solvers too. We can learn from that. So I think there'll be more humility and more reason to to take inspiration and learn from nature, and maybe artists can help us celebrate those wins.
That's a great answer. What about you, Staff? What's happened to make the world safe for climate?
Yeah, I think, well, I'll tie in two concepts that you guys have already touched on. First, keeping the carbon in the air and the carbon in the ground. We're always going to need the chemicals that we get from fossil fuels to sustain modern lifestyles, but we can make those chemicals from the carbon in the air. We don't need to pull up carbon from the ground and put it into the air to make them. So keeping the carbon in the air and the carbon in the ground, meaning no more drilling for fossil fuels, and make your synthetic fossil fuel replacement from the CO2 that we have available to us. And that ties into biomimicry, because that's what nature's been doing for the last 2 billion years. Photosynthesis is where all the oxygen in our atmosphere comes from. So every time you take a breath, that's photosynthesis having, done its thing, turning water and carbon dioxide into a hydrocarbon product and oxygen as the only byproduct, powered by renewable solar energy. That's what terraformed Earth to enable human life. And what we do is artificial photosynthesis. We do the same exact chemistry, except we do it in a man-made system at a higher efficiency than nature can afford. We actually just published a paper on comparing the efficiency of nature and artificial photosynthetic systems to show that we can easily reach systems that are 100 times more efficient than a tree. Combining those two tropes, I guess, would be one of the things that I would expect to see widespread. So artificial photosynthesis that help keep the carbon in the air and make sure we don't need to pull any carbon in the ground out.
Well, I want to say thank you to our panelists for what I think is a really interesting, probably unusual conversation for business and government to be having, hopefully, and something that our audience at home can maybe appreciate in terms of what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis versus what we might be able to do with the help of some art and science thinking. So I will ask you to get your questions ready, because we'll be popping up in a second to answer your questions. In the meantime, I will say so long to our panelists and see you in a few minutes. Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the live section. I'm going to ask my panelists to unmute their mics so that we can have a conversation. I hope that there was some ideas that were provocative enough for our art side people to weigh in on. Kurt, I see you're live. Any feedback, any thoughts right after seeing that tape? We did that a couple weeks ago.
It's always fun to watch yourself as you come back on. Now, adding to the conversation a bit, I guess I reinforce the idea that we need this vision idea. We were sold, there was something in the conversation, writing, art, whatever, that got us to this suburban farm, land form, the way our communities look and live, and the way we're about highways and transportation, all of it was an image in somebody's mind. It didn't, I think maybe perhaps I'm a little too conspiratorial, but the auto industry and others kind of said, well, if we can create these subsidies and do these things, we'll sell a lot of cars and we'll do this, that, and the other thing. And as some people pointed out, reinforce systemic racism, et cetera. So that's what I think where art is gotta come through for us is imagining communities of the future where we've actually withdrawn from high hazard areas. We've created better housing, healthier places to live, and more green, more nature in everybody's lives. And how we paint that picture, a lot of science fiction work has been dystopian, perhaps a little more utopian. Because this isn't it could be argued we're in kind of a dystopian period right now. Notwithstanding the tenets of our democracies being challenged. The inequity is getting so severe now with COVID. It's not a pretty picture right now. And so I just think art has got to take us to the next step. I don't think a lot of, as I said in the video, government lawyering or reinforcing the 20th century toolbox we have is really going to do that.
Susan, can you turn on your mic and give us some of your impressions of the panel? What was left unsaid for you?
I really liked where we landed, and I thought that we need to maybe explore a little more why we don't value the artists and the scientists, the creators of this vision that we hear that we need. We heard from Stafford, we heard from Kurt that like getting that vision could help propel us. So that's more of a question mark for me. Then I don't have an answer to that. Why do we value professional sports people so highly and artists so little? I think there's a whole big conversation there. And I want to make sure also there's a saying, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so I was intrigued when in one of the questions that came up in the chat here, reminding me of the comments that I made about disclosure aimed at investors and things like that. Like that's so maybe disclosure is my hammer, and wanting to make sure that we don't see everything as a disclosure issue. Another comment that came up in the chat reminded me to keep the focus on Main Street rather than Wall Street. Wall Street should be here to serve us, not to run the whole show. We've kind of got things backwards. I think there's a more natural affinity between Main Street and art and science than there is with the Wall Street. So to the suggestion that came up in the Q&A about might we see an ombudsman for art and nature on corporate boards? Corporate boards are definitely showing an interest in ESG, this disclosure stuff. So we might not see that ombudsperson there in short order. But I think that you might be able to, like a local business person in your community, you can forge that relationship.
I want to get to that question about stewardship and having a voice at the table, because I think that that's probably one of the missing links in a lot of this. But I just wanted to touch base with staff. Staff, you said probably my favorite thing in the entire conference, which is keep the carbon in the air, and keep the carbon in the ground. If we could just live by that one rule, we might have a lot of solutions come our way. What were your thoughts about the panel?
Well, I think that that's just it's kind of an oversimplification, but it's kind of you need to simplify things that much to make it palatable to people. And that was, I think, my takeaway was just how important it is to make this a cultural push to make carbon conversion part of not just carbon conversion, but carbon mitigation, all the different ways that we can prevent carbon dioxide equivalents from going into the atmosphere, part of our culture, and not not kind of like either a side thing or a new thing. It's got to become a main focus for us.
Yeah, I know that Ellen Quigley and Tim McDonald are on the in the audience. They were the mainstay of our finance panel back on last week, and I really wanted again to have people like you on these panels, because art and science needs to be able to know who they're talking to, and I think that, as you mentioned, we're siloed so many times. Tim's big thing, I'm speaking for Tim, I hope he doesn't mind, is that our funding system, like sovereign funds or pension funds, these long-term vision funds, have a role of fiduciary duty to their investors, but they also have a secondary role, which is stewardship. This idea that we need to guide for future generations, for nature, for peace, some of these social justice issues. And when we don't have Mother Nature or someone like a proxy at the table or an ombudsman at the table, these voices don't get heard. And I just wanted to push back on something that Susan said, and maybe Kurt too, about how difficult it is to get those kinds of voices at the table. Why? Why is it so difficult? Why shouldn't they be given a voice?
Yeah. Why is it difficult to get the unempowered and others to the table? Well, I'll just speak from experience. Let's just say I'm in the community and I'm trying to deal with a legacy pollution problem, a big Superfund toxic site, blah blah blah, and you're dealing with pretty complex information, risk analysis. What we're cleaning this up to 1 to the 100,000 in risk and this and that, and it gets challenging right out of the gate. So how does that community be determinative about what we do and connect to what is right there in their community, what this place is going to look like, solving these problems? The why is that it takes a lot of time, and people don't have it. They're really, the attention is so short term in their own lives. How many people are really thinking 5 years out? Not many. So I think it does require a mind shift. One thing I learned in doing that work is that the folks who are paycheck to paycheck, they're just not in that place. And we have to invest in that. And some more innovative stuff going on at EPA is where we actually give them money to buy their own help and others. So the why is tough. These are complex issues. There's a friend of mine who's into resilience thinking in a big way says, look, we need to embrace complexity. That's hard. Okay, that's really hard. People want to break things down. They're very transactional. It's kind of culturally baked into at least the American mindset. And embracing the complexity and walking through that, taking that journey through there, that's tough.
Susan, do you have a reason why Mother Nature might not be at the table?
Well, because corporations get to pick who they want at the table, and boards are generally limited in size to the minimum you need in order to get something done. And I sit on the board of a public sector organization. I think you're much more likely to see representation there, but on corporate boards, the focus is very much on that. What are the skills that we need now? It is interesting to see that those corporate boards are starting to increase their diversity of thinking. So not just diversity in sort of the classic sense, representational. Oh, great, let's run out and get some women or something like that. But they are starting to say, if we don't have the right people around the table, we might be missing something because we don't know what we don't know. And I have seen that some corporate governance specialists are starting to increase or are looking at what they call the competency matrix. So across all our board members, have we got a competency in accounting? Have we got a competency in risk? Have we got a competency in various things? And they're adding sustainability to this notion of competencies. And it was like 5 years ago, a client came running into me in a virtual sense saying, hey, I'm so excited. I got corporate social responsibility and sustainability into our board competency matrix. So it's happening, and there's lots of education out there right now for boards on how to increase sustainability thinking on their boards. So we might see this shift eventually. art might be a longer term thing, but science is creeping in there.
Staff, I don't know if you've seen some of the questions. Tia, who I guess must be in the UK somewhere, is asking about, loading up the Sahara with solar panels. And you're my tech guy on the panel. I'm wondering if you have any response to how some of these large scale geo-forming kinds of ideas that seem to be around.
Yeah, for sure. There is still a bit of technology, and there's a bit of work that needs to be done before we're able to, deploy 10 square kilometers of solar panels at once, and that we don't really have the capacity to store all that energy for when the sun's not shining, and for when for when we need electricity. Usually we need it when we don't need electricity when the sun's giving us the most, energy that we could convert to electricity. So there's infrastructural problems, that we need to solve to be able to improve renewable energy penetration into grids and stuff like that. And I mean, just actually to tie this into the previous, and not just the Sahara, you could do it in Arizona too. To tie this into the previous, discussion about corporate boards. I mean, there is a lot of hostility toward environmental and green initiatives in mature corporate boards. Like for an example that just happened a couple days ago, I don't know if you guys read in the news, but most of Shell's renewable energy executives either quit or left the company in protest over the company's direction in terms of renewable energy. And so you have these big businesses that have a lot of power, whether we like it or not. They have a ton of power and they have a ton of money, but the people in those businesses that are trying to advocate for renewable energy are not getting the support that they need. And that's an additional challenge, because if those businesses did switch to renewable energy, and they pushed, more aggressively in that direction, then that infrastructure would be coming along a lot faster.
I guess my takeaway from all of this is that if art and science has a role to play in day-to-day business and governance, is maybe in asking the provocative question or asking the what ifs, and having the perseverance to keep coming back with those questions, because it seems like the system might not be wanting to listen. But I guess it might get eroded over time. I wanted to say thank you to our panelists. It's coming up on the hour, and I appreciate people sticking with us through our little technical glitch at the front end of this, and that I hope that there were provocative questions here for our art and science community to mull on and to take away. I'm always amazed by how great our guests are, so I really appreciate the focus and goodwill that you've all put towards this panel and others, and I wish you the greatest in holidays. So bye for now, and we'll talk again another time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.